ahead and install the standoffs that will hold the upper deck of the chassis. Please note that 2 of the standoffs will be installed the opposite way of the others, while 4 of them will use nuts to be tightened to the chassis. 2 of them will need to use bolts. You will see why in the following steps during the assembly. Now I'll go ahead and start installing them one by one. The 2 that will need bolts will be here on the back. The rest, here, here, here and here, will simply use nuts to be installed. So simply using these 4 holes first, insert the standoff with its male thread downward through the hole, and then place nut on the bottom and tighten loosely. Tighten it reasonably well so it will hold into place, but later when we put the upper deck it will need to realign, so do not tighten fully. Repeat the same step with the next one. Place a nut, insert the thread and loosely tighten. Continue with the 2 on the other side. Place the nut, insert the thread and loosely tighten. And finally the last one. We do not need any tools for this, since we don't want to tighten them too much at this point. These 4 are ready. Now let's go ahead and install the 2 on the back. In this case we'll use both. I believe the bolts and the nuts are M3, but I'm not sure about that. I simply measured them with the standoffs, since everything was just piled in a single bag without labels. So simply insert the bolt from the bottom into the standoff and loosely tighten. Repeat the same procedure with the next one. If necessary, we can use a screwdriver to help us, but I don't think this will be necessary at this step. So we'll just leave them loosely tightened like this. Before I install the upper deck of the chassis, I want to prepare the motor wires in order to easily connect them later to the Raspberry Pi head. For this we have to group the wires. Each motor has 2 wires. So to group them properly, pick the upper wire from one of the motors and the lower wire from the other one. I hope you can see clearly here. So this one is here on the bottom, this one is on the top. Pick these 2 and group them together. For now I'll simply tie them together in a simple knot. Later I'll simply adjust the length the way I want it, cut the wires, solder them together and connect to the motor driver connectors of the head. The other 2 should be the upper from this motor and the lower from this motor. Again, we group them together, so upper to lower on both motors. Group the 2 of them, make a temporary knot to keep them together while we work on the rest of the assembly, and leave them aside. This step is completed. Now it is time to install the upper deck of the chassis on the lower deck. We'll install it on these standoffs. However, we first have to arrange our cables to make our life easier later. The motor cables will go through this hole on the back from the bottom to the top, and they will be connected here to the motor driver of the Raspberry Pi head. The servo cable will go through this hole here, and it also will be connected somewhere here on the head. We'll see where a bit later. Now I'll place the upper deck on the standoffs. I have left them not fully tightened in order to be able to adjust everything, and I'll start by tightening with bolts. One bolt here, on one of the standoffs here. Then I'll go ahead, putting it here, diagonal, to allow everything to adjust along the diagonal. Any mechanical tension, leave it loose. Insert ball through the hole here into this standoff. Again going diagonal, the other diagonal. Next one. Leaving everything still loose until we're done. Next one. This time bolt. And the final bolt. Once when we have everything in place, I can go ahead, leave the card on the side to make my life easier, and using the wrench and the screwdriver start tightening everything top to bottom. Now we can tighten everything since everything is in place. Repeat the procedure on the diagonal. Then the next one. And that other one on the diagonal. And finally the two remaining in the center. As you can see, the reason I installed everything on the upper deck is that access here underneath is very difficult, so tightening all the nuts once the two decks are joined is very difficult. However, following the order I did, I believe, made our life significantly easier. The only thing to remember is to be careful not to damage the electronics, but with some care that should be easy to do. This step is completed and our card starts to take really good shape and look more and more like a complete donkey car.